Chapter 61. In the Light of the Royal Gardens. Canterlot, the early hours of the morning. The new day had come, and all apprehension from the previous day returned with it in full force. Each calm moment would only serve to build upon the already run-down nerves of the ponies. The idea of the calm before the storm, filling them with dread for anything that may have led to chaos in the next moment. They knew the changelings were coming. It would be foolish of the Empress to wait until their strength returned. It was just a matter of waiting for her move. It would be a busy morning. The now rested Princess Celestia and Princess Luna meeting up to continue discussions regarding the country's uncertain future. Captain Broadsword and Captain Vladimir Vespertilio would likewise be attending their own duties as captains of the Royal Guard. The shield above the city shimmered a pink hue, signifying that Prince Shining Armor was, at that moment in time, keeping the barrier energized and protecting them from any outside intrusion. But not every pony, or every one, had places they had to be. The remaining free changelings did little more than hole up in their provided rooms. And that was how the guard preferred it, given the circumstances. None of them had desires to fall to the Empress, and the guard were on edge enough as it is, with a changeling swarm inevitably on approach. Not that they dared protest when the former Captain Carduus, alongside his family, decided to stretch their legs and take a walk through the castle. He was a personal friend of their boss's, after all. They had just departed their rooms, Juventus glad to do something other than stare at the same walls for hours on end, and headed off in the directions of the Royal Gardens. Juventus walked a little bit ahead of her parents, while Panacea walked a step behind, next to her husband, accompanying him as he limped his way through the many halls.
I heard that the princesses returned to the city yesterday,
Panacea noted to her husband. Yeah, I did too, Carduus confirmed. Their cover story still holds. Not that there's much point to it now. They failed.
Obviously, since the shield is still up,
Panacea replied dryly.
Honey, I would ask what happens now, but I know I won't like the answer.
You know the answer, too, Carduus pointed out, glancing up at Juventus with concern. I want you both to remain deep in the castle when it happens, with Scarlet and Valiant Snow.
I will, with you right there alongside us,
Panacea stated.
You're not limp enough to die when you can barely move on your own hooves.
Somebody has to help. I'm not that useless. Panacea sighed.
Why does no one ever listen to their doctor?
I'm afraid it's just a fact of life, honey, Carduus said with a smirk. Your medical skills might do some good back here when it all hits the fan. There's going to be plenty of injured. Make no mistake.
I know,
Panacea responded sadly.
But I'd rather you not be among them.
I'd rather no one had to be injured at all, Carduus noted. The Empress has other ideas, though. I still find it hard to believe that the Queen is going to be the one fighting against us.
I don't want to think about it.
You're not the only one, Carduus muttered.
Dad!
Juventus shouted from up ahead, pointing a hoof through a doorway.
The gardens are through here!
All right, head on through, Carduus stated back, he and his wife moving to follow their daughter through the doorway. It led out into a brightly decorated courtyard, a small but breathtaking example of what the Royal Gardens had to offer. There were many exotic flowers around the place, the grass cut to precision by the pony in charge of maintaining it all. Looking around, Carduus quickly came to the conclusion that it was in that very courtyard that Queen Twilight had arrived some time before, ready to then head off towards the Crystal Empire and the lands beyond it. The very start of all that had befallen them. But they were not alone in the courtyard, there being a single other occupant standing directly in the center under a stone gazebo. She was sat against one of the pillars holding up the structure, her back faced to the family. Her eyes seemed to be closed, a look of remembrance on her face. Princess Miyamori Cadenza didn't even hear them approach, too engrossed in whatever thought was crossing her mind. The pink alicorn seemed to be largely at ease, though a small aura of sadness was definitely visible to the emotion-sensitive changelings.
Princess Cadence,
Carduus softly greeted, causing the alicorn to open her eyes and turn her head to the source of the voice.
Good morning.
Cadence smiled.
Good morning, Carduus. And you wish to relax here in the gardens?
My family and I wanted to take a stroll around, stretch our legs, maybe our wings, Carduus commented, flicking one of his gossamer wings in demonstration. I suppose you wish to do much the same?
Something like that,
Cadence confirmed.
How are you all? We're fine, Your Highness,
Panacea responded.
Equestrian hospitality has been generous, considering. There's nothing to consider,
Cadence responded adamantly.
None of this is your fault. Why would we turn you away? Especially you and your family, Carduus. You are Twilight's captain of the guard, after all.
Back in the days of yesteryear, Carduus acknowledged with a small smile.
He still tries to act as if he is,
Panacea added in with a small smirk.
The old stallion is stubborn until the end.
Cadence chuckled.
My shining armor would be much the same in his position. But then again, wouldn't all husbands like ours?
Panacea and Cadence giggled, even Juvenis joining in on the amusement. Carduus just gave them a deadpan glare, making no comment. Eventually, to his immense relief, the intense tittering stopped. Cadence gave a small sigh, walking out from under the gazebo and up to the family.
Anyway, I shouldn't remain for too long,
she stated.
My aunts may have need of me, and I need to let my husband have a break at some point. What were you thinking about?
Juvenis asked curiously.
Oh, Flurryheart,
Cadence explained.
We took her to this garden once, many years ago. I remember her running around and playing in the grass. There was some diplomatic conference or another on at the time, so Twilight was there. And Flurry would keep asking Twilight to turn into various things, and she'd always accommodate her when she could.
The Queen loves being an aunt, Carduus noted softly. I think she always wanted her own daughter someday. There was a telltale sparkle in Cadence's eye at that statement.
Oh, I am aware. She's been an ongoing project of mine, after all.
I'm not even going to ask for details on that, Carduus deadpanned.
Probably for the best,
Cadence agreed jokingly.
But it's an ongoing process, and I have every intention of finishing it too.
I hope you do, Carduus responded. Cadence's smile faltered a little.
Yeah, so do I. If only I could just go into that hive mind and drag her out myself.
That final comment had been under the princess's breath, but Carduus had heard it all the same. She then said her farewells. When she had departed, this just left the changeling family alone in the courtyard. Juvenis wandered off to have a look around, while Panacea looked quizzically to a rather thoughtful-looking Carduus.
Honey? What's wrong?
Panacea asked. Drag her from the hive mind, Carduus muttered. Panacea frowned.
Don't you get any ideas? You know the changelings are absorbed at the moment of assimilation.
Yeah. No changeling can retrieve the queen, Carduus acknowledged. But I know that Princess Luna is looking at access the Empress's hive mind via her dream magic.
Yes, and?
Carduus sat on his haunches, humming to himself in thought. I need to think on this, but I think I might have an idea on how we can help with that. Carduus began to relay his concept to his wife, who listened intently and only spoke up on it when he was finished. If they were right, it had the potential to provide the missing link for Luna's plan to infiltrate the Empress's hive mind. But while they continued on with their self-set task, the rest of the world did not sleep and wait for them. The cogs kept on turning, and events continued to unfold around them. Somewhere, not as far from Canterlot as the ponies would have preferred, the swarm persisted. They approached, a pitch-black nightmare to consume all who set eyes upon it. It wouldn't be long. equestrian countryside. Kennerlot sat far in the distance, the pink bubble soon being swapped out for a cyan-colored one. This view was achieved from a small village a fair distance further from the capital in the now devastated Ponyville, but they still just barely had a view of the city from their location. The village was far smaller than Ponyville, only holding a population of maybe 100 or so ponies. All of the inhabitants were of the Earth pony variety, having founded the village in order to have a nice and peaceful life away from the major hustle and bustle of the major settlements of Equestria. It was a village where every pony knew every pony, and its general unimportance had meant that not a single changeling had ever set hoof within its borders. But they had seen the effects of the war. They saw the distant smoke that had enveloped Ponyville, and they could all easily see the shield. The local paper and imported national paper had told them all about the destruction of Manhattan, and the conflicts in other locales around Equestria. The radio never talked about anything else, the war being the singular most important story throughout the entire country. But the village had remained safe, uninteresting to the swarm, unnoticed and ultimately untouched. And that morning was no different to any other. Mares and stallions alike arose from their beds, throwing back their curtains and blinds to reveal the first rays of the morning sun. Those with fillies and colts got their children ready for a day at the village's small schoolhouse at the edge of town. The schoolhouse itself wasn't dissimilar to Ponyville's own, with similar bright colors and with various happy drawings created by foals scattered all around. The market wasn't often considered bustling, but it was nevertheless the social center of the village. The adults would gather here to buy general groceries and meet up with friends and talk about their days. The war was often mentioned, though many tried to banish it from their minds and continued with their lives unabated. Their lives weren't adventurous and exciting, but peaceful. And they were fine with that. They'd chosen it themselves, after all. Unfortunately, they were between the city of Kennerlot and the largest changeling swarm any pony had ever seen. It started small. A few hushed and fearful gasps and distant black knots circumventing the town and heading in the direction of Kennerlot. But then more began to pop up, and the swarm kept on getting thicker and thicker. And then it was all over the village. Countless changeling drones swooped down upon the defenseless ponies and began tearing through homes, businesses, and even the schoolhouse. It was like an unstoppable rogue hurricane set loose upon some woefully unprepared buildings. Screams echoed for miles, the villagers attempting to find shelter anywhere they could. Some tried to flee into the fields, while others tried hiding in their homes, boarding themselves within closets and bathrooms. When they fled to the fields, green spellfire cut them down. When they hid in their houses, they were torn from their foundations and scattered to the winds. Some, numbering in the single digits, may have been lucky enough to escape with their lives. The swarm came in as an unstoppable force against a very movable object, but it didn't stick around to check its work. In but a few minutes, the full village had been rendered into little more than piles upon piles of rubble, the swarm moving on and leaving the morning sky clear once more. Those few survivors would then poke out their heads, beaten and terrified. Then, once certain that the swarm had passed, they forwent burying their dead for the time being, and instead made for the nearest town after them for help. And yet the swarm persisted onwards. Their target was clearly visible on the early horizon, a cyan jewel twinkling under the sun's rays. And the changeling queens all looked onwards. Onwards towards the end.